All right, everybody. Good morning and welcome to Strategy 1. We will be using data trackers through Schoology to track student mastery. And before we get into any of the technical side, this is just a brief overview on the benefits of using data analysis in our teaching and classrooms. So, data analysis is an opportunity to gain insight into our teaching practices and their impact on equitable outcomes for students. From this analysis, teachers should then take action on data by teaching past content differently than the first time to ensure impact on student learning. And to briefly summarize that is this nice little kind of graphic here that's just a cycle of how we use data in our teaching and instruction. So starting with the teach, after our teach, we're analyzing student data, then we're using that student data to adapt teaching and reassess. Then we plan from those standards, we teach, analyze student data, and that cycle keeps repeating itself. So our CRE connection is my responsibility for this module. So I'm responsible for the academic and social emotional success of all of my students. And we are specifically looking at DPS practice number 2 that helps us get towards my responsibility. So DPS practice number 2 is frequently collecting student work and student performance data, analyze results by traditionally marginalized student groups, identifying learning gaps, reflecting on how classroom instruction led to those gaps, and developing next steps to effectively and rapidly address areas of concern. So, we're going to routinely reflect on the results of a lesson and analyze the effectiveness of instructional practices in order to determine our next steps. So, how does collecting and analyzing data support this DPS mindset? Or even what does collecting and analyzing data in your classroom look like? I'll give you 2 or so minutes to think and drop an answer in the chat box. Or if you're more comfortable to come over the mic and share your response, feel free to raise your hand and come over the mic and share your response there. But let's take about 2 minutes and I'll drop those questions in the chat box as well. How does collecting and analyzing data support this mindset? And also, how does collecting and analyzing data look in your own classroom? Thank you, Amy. Let's take about 1 more minute of think time to respond to one of these 2 questions. What does collecting data in your classroom look like? And how does collecting and analyzing data guide instruction in your classroom or support our DPS mindset? Again, feel free to drop your answers in the chat box or come over the mic. Um, Personally, I was somebody that used my SLO to kind of the best benefit of my classroom when I was a social studies teacher. SLO data collection can be super heavy feeling sometimes, but once you kind of figure out how to make it work for your own instruction and informing what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, I think that's when a light bulb kind of popped off in my head on how to use my data best in my classroom. Andrew, I really appreciate your response, and if anybody wants to come over the mic and further elaborate on their uh, comments in the chat, feel free to. But I think being behind and feeling left behind can have a big impact on students' social and emotional success. And using data, I'm assuming, to just make sure that we are seeing, hearing, and responding to every student. I think that's a super powerful response. Thank you. David's I love how you talk about using small groups based on the data that you're seeing and individual kind of responses to instruction. That's great. And thank you, Joseph, for just talking about basic ways and structures in your own classroom on how you're collecting data. Data can sometimes sound like a scary word, but you realize that you're collecting data in almost everything that you're doing. Quick checks for understanding, exit tickets, those are all kind of being used to inform your instruction. That's great. And Mike, thank you for joining in. Yeah, just other quick checks for understanding. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Also curious, what are passports?
Okay, we'll see if Mike gets back to you on what passports are in the chat. Until then, though, if you've been in our PLs before, this is the part where you have an option. So we're going to go through Mastery Tracker, how to use it, how to set it up in detail right now, so you can hang with us. Or if you just like to work independently during this time, you will see all of the links to a really nice series of YouTube videos that will walk you through everything we're going to talk about. They are in this. They are right here in the slide deck. They're also in the notes section of the slides, so you can do it yourself, walk through it at your own pace. Either way, you do need to return to the main room, the one we started in, at 9:50. Actually, are we gonna? I think we are. Actually, return here at 9:10, so we can close out together, and then we'll all go to the other room together at 9:15. So if you could be back by 9:10, if you decide to work independently, that would be great. And if you just want to follow along with us, we are going to go through everything, but feel free to raise your hand or jump in the chat if you want us to slow down or ask any questions at all while we're going through any of this information.
Also, just wanted to put it out there that we are one person down, and we were going to be demonstrating kind of all of these steps live, which we are totally able to do. But just kind of for the time sake of our presentation, we're just going to kind of go through the steps. And if anybody wants us to slow down and actually walk through them, please feel free to stop us, pause us, ask questions. That's what we're here for.
Okay, so if you look at this, this is what we're going to be covering today in our work time. So how to set it up, how to align assignments to learning objectives, how to align rubrics to learning objectives, how to view and export your data from the tracker once you have it, and how to use Mastery Tracker for SLO. That is a very common way it is used throughout DPS to really see if your students are hitting mastery. So we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is show you Schoology and show you where the Mastery Tracker is located and how to set up the settings. So I think, do we want to share? Yeah, we're going to share our screen and actually bring you into Schoology so you can see what we're talking about here. Just give us 1 second. Maybe.
Awesome. Never have seen this before. Give me a second.
Okay.
Awesome. Ready to go.
All right.
So the first thing that we're going to do again is look at our mastery tracker, and the way to get to that is if you take a look on your Schoology home screen, you go into a course. I'm using my sandbox course for today. On the left-hand side is a mastery button. You'll click that. And then you can go ahead into the settings wheel and take a look at mastery settings.
Okay, so you're in your settings. From here, you are going to determine what percent is going to meet expectations and what percent is going to be what your students need to get to exceed expectations. So this is going to look different for every teacher, but an example would be here 50% means they meet the expectations for that learning objective or skill, and then 75% would be they exceed that expectation. And then below that, it's how many times does that student need to meet or exceed that expectation to be labeled as, to hit mastery. So it might just be you want them to show one time that they met or exceeded, and that's mastery, or maybe you want them to hit that 2 or 3 times. So that's going to be up to you in that box. And you can change that if you need to. You can go back and change these, but be aware it will change everything that you've previously put in the tracker if you come in and change the settings. And then for the grade overall learning objectives, Kaylee, can you explain this? Because I know that you've used this before and I don't want to explain it incorrectly.
Absolutely. So I'm not sure how many people out here have read Grading for Equity or done Grading for Equity work at their school, whether they've read the book or not. But there is a train of thought in that book talking about decaying averages, meaning your most recent grade is going to have the heaviest weight in your grade book. If we are hoping that our students are improving throughout our course, then the most relevant and the weightiest grade will be the most recent grade. And you don't have to have this as an option if you don't want it. You can just have a basic average or even the highest score. And it's all kind of depending on your philosophy of mastery. So if you think, oh, if they hit it once, that's a sign of mastery, I'm going to go by their highest score. If they're able to demonstrate it, good to go. Or if you want a whole average for the quarter to see their mastery level on over an average, or decaying average would be that Grading for Equity mindset.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And then right below that, it goes along with what she was just speaking to as students are learning more, then they're going to be reaching mastery. So if you want to, how you want to weight the most recent, because they're going to be getting better. So that would be where you see the 75%, and you can decide on the weight for their most recent assignments. Okay, so after you have the settings set up, let's talk about how you're actually going to align assignments to learning objectives. So when we are in school, when you are in Schoology and you're in an assignment, we'll just bring you to an example assignment. Okay, so if you go down to where it says learning objectives, you will see a button that says align. And when you click on that, this is where you are going to find learning objectives. Now, I'm just going to say right now that it could be a little bit tricky looking through all of these and finding exactly what you want. We could talk a little bit more to that here in a second. You also have the opportunity to create your own learning objectives. So say for your SLO, it's not something that's in Common Core. You can create your own learning objectives as well. Let's see here. Okay, so for this, we're just gonna demo picking some of these objectives, and I don't know, Kayla, if you want to kind of say what you're doing when you're picking them, but then we just want to show you how they will show up on the mastery tracker once you have selected them. You're muted.
Awesome. First time of the day. So, like Amy said, you can either choose from custom learning objectives or learning objectives that are already there, either national standards or state standards. I would kind of go back and forth. Not all of my assignments in my grade book were for my SLO. So sometimes I would just want to see a basic read on a Common Core standard. So we're all secondary folks here. We know it's split up into English, language arts, math, and if you go into also if you're in science or if you have other kind of content areas, you can go into the state standards for Colorado. I know, just sounds like there's two auto tech teachers in here. Also, Adam, those passports sound awesome. I was typing a response to you but couldn't finish it. So anyway, Common Core learning objectives. I was a literacy teacher, so I'll just kind of guide you through what I would click. I would go into English language arts. It's organized by grade level. 8th grade, literacy is broken up into reading, writing, speaking, and language development. And you just kind of click through until you get your very specific standards. But another option that you can do is your custom learning objectives. If you go into, let's see, creating your own personal learning objectives, which I'll show you later, you can kind of go into your own folders and pull those objectives as well. And the way that's going to look once you've started assessing students, let's see, you can go into your course and look at your mastery tracker. And your different assignments will start to show up based on the criteria or the standards that you have selected in your gradebook.
Okay, so another way that you can use the tracker is by aligning rubrics to your learning objectives. So in order to do that, you're going to go to Schoology and go to Grade Setup. You have to click around a lot. Thank you for sharing your screen and walking them through this. So we're going back into a course, and then on the left, going to Grade Setup. And then over on the right where you see rubrics, you can add a new rubric, and this is where you will be able to select learning objectives. So if you click on Add and go to Rubric, you will see right down there at the bottom, there's a little button that says Learning Objectives. If you click there, they will bring you to that screen where you can select objectives again, and then you can have them in a rubric so you can quickly grade the assignments this way and attach the rubric to it. Once this rubric is set up with these learning objectives that you want, it will be saved in your rubrics. So when you go to an assignment, when you go back to the screen when you're creating an assignment, so we just named this one example 1, I think, that we quickly created. So you have your rubric, it has the learning objectives you want, and you have an assignment that you know you're going to want to track mastery on. If you go down to where it has the grading scale, you will see example 1 rubric is one of the options now. So it will attach that rubric you just made with the learning objectives directly to this assignment. And then when you grade it, it will go directly into the mastery tracker. So does anybody have any questions about anything we've covered so far? Setting up the mastery tracker settings, how to align learning objectives, or using a rubric with learning objectives? This would be a great time to ask.
How did you guys get the rubric going again? I just took my eye off the screen and missed that.
Okay, no problem. So when you're in Schoology, go to your grade setup.
Okay.
And then you're going to go over to the right where it says rubrics and click add.
There it was. Okay.
And then from there, you should see the button that says learning objectives. And that's where you can add custom ones or Common Core or whatever you're going to be using to track mastery.
Okay. Awesome. There it is. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also, not all kind of rubrics are based on standards, and you can create your own rubrics without it being tied to a specific learning objective or criteria. And we have videos that kind of link and go into more detail, but again, a social studies teacher, I did a lot of projects. I was also a GT teacher. I know we have auto tech teachers in here. So based on maybe a project that you're doing, it could just kind of, your own categories can be added into these rubrics as well. I'm going to give a little bit of wait time for you guys to kind of click around Schoology, play around, ask any questions that you may have before moving on. I'm also just going to leave up on the screen kind of the main one that we went into on how to create a rubric. There's basic 3 steps in here where you go into your grade setup, you add a rubric, and you hit create new. Use this time, let's give about like 5 or so minutes to click through Schoology, either practice creating your own rubric or creating an assignment with a standard attached. And if you run into any trouble, now's a great time to ask. Or if you have a specific scenario in your classroom that you wanted to talk out, now's a great time to do that as well. But we'll give this time to work. Let's take about 2 more minutes to play around in Schoology, either adding a standard to an assignment or creating a rubric using standards. Again, if you run into any steps that you might have missed or just need a quick refresher, just let us know. All right, I'll give you a few seconds to come back into our Google Meet. Before I move on, are there any questions? Does anybody want me to review rubrics or adding standards to assignments? All right, the next thing that we are going to run through are once you have your assignments set up and your rubric set up and you get assignments out to your students and the data starts coming in, how to take a look at this data, how to understand what you're seeing, and also how to export that data into maybe a Google spreadsheet or a CSV if that's something that you're looking to do. So again, pretend like you've assigned a few things to your kiddos and you go in now to your mastery over on the left-hand side. For today, I'm going to show you, I'm pretending that I'm using my mastery tracker. I created custom learning objectives for my SLO as an 8th grade social studies teacher. And I have 5 different criteria for my SLO for argumentative writing, claim, evidence, reasoning, organization, and conventions. I added those custom learning objectives, and I'll show you how to do this in a little bit, into my own rubric. And now every assignment for my SLO, it will automatically show how my students are doing based on each of these criteria. So you can see some of these students are all in the green. They're either exceeding or meeting expectations, or you can see in red which criteria still needs to be worked on in order to help those kiddos get to meeting expectations. Another thing that I like to do, this is kind of a macro overview of your data. If you want to specifically look at each standard and the assignment for each standard, you can click that hyperlinked criteria and you can see each of the assignments that you have so far given to kiddos that have this criteria linked there. So that's kind of looking at your mastery tracker. And now I'm going to show you how to, once you get your data, how to export that data. So from your mastery tracker, you can go into your settings wheel at the top. You can either export a whole summary or you can get a detail of all students. A summary, again, would just be students and their mastery level. the detail of all students would show each assignment and what each student scored, a very detailed look. So it automatically downloads as a CSV. And it pops up in an Excel sheet that you can also turn into a Google sheet if that's what you're more comfortable with. All right. Any questions on how to view the mastery tracker? All right. And the last thing that we are going to look at today before we kind of cut you loose and let you play around more in Schoology is using your mastery tracker for your SLO and adding custom learning objectives. Now, I understand that we all teach different contexts or contents, and DPS has different resources for each content. But I do know that for a lot of secondary contents, there already are SLO rubrics created. And for me personally, as a social studies teacher, I used the already created DPS rubrics and I just copy and pasted those criteria into my Schoology custom created rubric. Amy, can you drop a link to everybody for the DPS bank of SLOs? Thank you. And I'll give you a minute or two to look through that resource bank to see if you're able to find your content. And once you're able to find your content, I'll show you how to use those custom SLO objectives and put them in your Schoology. So just clicking through, I was a social studies middle school teacher. I did argumentative writing for 8th grade. And you can see the standards for 8th grade students are in the center. The vertical down and vertical up are on the left and the right. And you can see if you keep scrolling down, each standard that's assessed is broken down into the 5 categories of exceed expectations, met expectations, approached expectations, and partially met expectations. And then the last category did not yet meet expectations. So I directly used these descriptions from the DPS resource bank and added them into my custom learning objectives in Schoology. And I can show you that in a moment. Does anybody need help finding their SLO resources? Awesome, Andrew. And Andrew, what do you teach?
Advanced manufacturing, but not really.
Are there SLO resources for that?
No, not really. No, there's not. But I'm teaching 9th graders this year and having them do my career exploration. And these other gentlemen on the call have been gracious enough to have awesome activities for my students when I go into their classroom. So thanks, guys. I might as well start kissing butt now.
That's awesome. All right, now once you have found your SLO resources, I'll show you how to add those into your learning objectives. You will go into your resources. So this is probably the tab in Schoology I used least. I would always use my courses because I'm teaching, groups if I had clubs, but resources I really started using to my advantage like my last 2 or 3 years of teaching. So resources. Once you're in the resources, you go into learning objectives. I added a folder for my social studies SLO objectives, and you can do that by adding a folder. And then within my folder for my SLO objectives, I just copy and pasted the 5 criteria that I saw in my DPS resource bank, and I just copied the description of each of the standards that's here. So then every time, now that I have these learning objectives, I clicked add custom learning objective. So criteria number 1, oh, I spelled that way wrong. Claim, and then I can just paste that objective in there. Now when I go into assignments, it's super easy for me if I'm doing an SLO. To just align it to now my custom learning objectives, which can be found in my personal folder and going into my social studies ones that I added and just clicking all of the ones that I want to assess my students on. And we know that your SLO is broken down into a few categories. You're not always assessing them in every category for every assessment. So you can pick and choose which standards you evaluate them on. All right. If you are not yet in our slide deck, we'll drop a link to our slide deck, and I highly recommend going to slide 26 if you need kind of a refresher on any of the steps that we went through. We have 6 tiny, like 2-minute videos showing each of these steps. So how to, just a basic intro on Schoology Mastery Tracker, how to set it up in Schoology, how to create an assignment using Mastery Tracker, how to then organize your data, how to use and create rubrics, and then how to use Mastery Tracker for your SLO. These are just quick videos if you need a refresher, or we have plenty of time. We have about 10 minutes before we're gonna regroup in this room and migrate back into the main room. If during this 10 minutes you either wanna watch these videos or have a quick Q&A session with Amy and I, we would love to help you kind of visualize this in your own classroom setting if you're struggling to do that right now. About 5 minutes.
I had a quick question. Is that me or is that somebody else?
I think that's you.
Okay. So once you put it in your resource, you use your resource tab and put it in there. How do you get it? Is it going to show up then as a custom objective in your courses then is when you go to?
Yeah, so once you have a custom learning objective in your resources, and you go to add an assignment, or even if you want to create an assessment and link a learning objective to a question, you can do that too. I can show that in a second. But once you do that, if you click Align, you'll choose the first option, Custom Learning Objectives, Personal, and then it should appear in your personal folder.
Okay.
And it sounds like you're working with a team. And like I have some schools right now that have school custom learning objectives, or you and your colleagues can set up group ones if you're sharing a group of students or a group of learning objectives that you wanted to share across classrooms. That's another option for you to do as well.
Cool.
Were you able to find the ones that you created?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So if we were doing one as a team or as a group, like I might be working with the 9th grade math teachers, how would we set that up? How would you make it a group versus a personal?
Yeah, so you can go into groups. Do you have a group for this group yet?
Nope, not yet, no.
Okay, so if you go into groups, you can set up in the upper right-hand corner, it says My Groups, and you can create a group. And you can name it Math Group, and then you can make it invite only, or you can have people allow requests, or you can just kind of keep it open. And then once you create your group, you can go over to members and just manually invite adding your own members that you'd like if you want to get a group started.
Cool.
So then if you get a group set up and you want to do a group learning objective, you would just go into, if you can see on my left-hand side, I'm on my personal tab for my resources right now.
Mm-hmm.
You would just click group.
Yeah.
And then all the groups that you're a part of will appear on the left-hand side, and you can add groups to those, or add resources to those, sorry.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for asking.
No problem. Thank you.
We have about 2 minutes left. Anyone else have any questions for their specific situation? That's awesome, Andrew. And once you start getting kind of projects and adding rubrics for your projects into Schoology, if you do that same project next year for a different quarter for a different set of students, it's so nice to have that already created, and you can just kind of pull that up too, and just a resource everybody can use. Also love hearing about project-based learning in math classrooms. That's awesome. Adam said adding rubrics and utilizing mastery options in Schoology. That's awesome. Kind of taking on 2 skills at once. Mike says using more data in Schoology. I think for a lot of people, SLOs can be overwhelming. I had like 4 different like Google Sheets trackers when I was doing social studies. And when I finally realized I could just do it all in Schoology and it tracked mastery for me, it was a game changer for me. That's awesome, David. Linking SLO data to Schoology instead of a separate spreadsheet. Yeah, exactly. So much easier. And then you can add people into your courses, and you can share that data easily with them too. All right. Amy, anything from you before we return to the main room?
No. I don't have anything to add, but thanks to everybody for joining us today. Remember that you can always watch this in the Schoology course if you miss anything. And really, those videos, slide 26, are so helpful. So if you have any questions, I refer to those videos. And I'll drop the link to the main Google Meet back in the chat so we can head back over there.
Also, we'll drop our emails. I think, honestly, the main work that I've done with teachers and an admin this year have been around mastery and been around equitable grading practices and creating rubrics in Schoology. If you really just kind of want to spitball ideas on how this can specifically be applied to your classroom, that's what we're here for. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. That's honestly what a lot of my problem solving this year has been geared around.